Thank you, Shelley. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, today we're going to talk about challenges in securing hybrid landscapes. So hybrid landscapes basically means we have systems that are on-premise, and then we have systems that are in the cloud, and ultimately we have a hybrid landscape that we have to have under control from a security perspective. So what do we have on the agenda today? Just 1 minute about exciting who we are, what do we do, for those of you that don't know us just yet. And then we'll look into the topic. We'll talk about a little bit just like, high level stuff around the intelligent enterprise, and then ultimately what it means with hybrid landscapes, why is it so challenging, and what are those challenges that we have that are facing, that we have to face, and then we have to get under control. And then we also look into SAP standard solutions that SAP offers to counter or to have an answer and a solution for most of those challenges that we commonly see with our customers. With that, we want to get started. Literally just 1 minute, who we are, what do we do. Exciting has been around since 2008, originally founded back in Switzerland. We have offices throughout the world. We have roughly 135 employees as of today. We have a very strong relationship with SAP. We're an SAP Gold partner. We have different certifications, especially for our tools. All our tools are fully SAP certified for integration with S/4HANA. That is a very strong recognition to say that everything that we do with our tools and solutions that we offer follow SAP's best practice and follow SAP standard. We're also a very strong partner when it comes to educational stuff. So there's a lot of trainings and delivery of training for SAP. So very strong partner in that area. With that, I want to jump into the topic. Enough about us. Let's talk about what really matters. And that's when we talk about hybrid landscapes. The first couple of slides was really like high level, a little bit of just history and just to kind of get us set into the topic. When we talk about intelligent enterprise, a lot of companies and especially SAP nowadays talks about intelligent enterprises. So everything needs to be more intelligent. Everything needs to be connected. Interconnectivity is a big topic. And we also see that when we look just back, like if you just look back 50, 60 years and look at the evolution that we had in IT, it has been significant. And there have been, every decade there was something, major changes that happened. I mean, in the 60s and to 80s, we had, the first PCs, mainframes that came out, where we just had, in today's world, we would say a stupid computer that, could do 1 + 1, but that was amazing at the time. Eventually, then we had the client and server, we had the internet that came around, so a lot of things changed with that. In the 2000s, into the 2010s, we saw a lot of move into the cloud, mobile, smartphones became very important, big data. We were collecting more and more data. We had more data points, more devices, IoT devices that are feeding data into cloud applications and so on. And nowadays we're talking about, really intelligent technologies or in the intelligent enterprise altogether, meaning we have a lot of IoT devices that collect and record data, and all that data, all those data points have to be fed back into a system. So we have huge databases, big data, and just looking and having a lot of data doesn't really help. We need to be able to analyze and evaluate those data. That's when machine learning comes into the picture. That's when we talk about artificial intelligence. I think every one of us saw or heard about ChatGPT and the new stuff in the new AI tools that are floating around the internet. They're very, very, very powerful, and obviously companies want to profit from that. That's why a lot of companies nowadays are adopting more and more technologies. We have different ideas are floating around. We have with distributed computing, where we have a lot of, not just our own infrastructure we're also using infrastructure from others, where we're just consuming, and so the entire model is changing. Now, what does that mean? Ultimately, what I said, we have, every company wants to profit and benefit from that intelligence that we have, all the data points that we have, and want to map that and analyze based on that, so that we can have better decision making, that we can for example, also respond and react to events better, whether those are security events. We can, we want to not just, see and know, okay, there was a security incident. We want to know from where, what was it. We want to have as much information as possible to respond and react to anything that happened, whether it was positive or negative. It doesn't matter. The more information we have available in a more structured way, the better we can respond to an incident, or we can better respond to something that's happening in our business, for business processes, predictability, and so on. That's very, very important. And so obviously SAP is offering a lot of new solutions, that are under the context of Intelligent Enterprise Suite, where we ultimately want to go for like a very intelligent, networked system where everything is interconnected, and we're repurposing data from left to right, so that we have always the best possible data available to make a decision, or ideally have a tool make decisions for us. So that is obviously happening. And what does that mean? That means that we have a lot of new applications that come into picture. We have a lot of new applications in form of cloud applications, SaaS solutions. SaaS stands for software as a service. We're basically just consuming a service, a software from a provider. And we see a couple of SAP solutions here, like SuccessFactors, the S/4HANA Cloud, C/4HANA, Fieldglass, Concur, Ariba, but also Analytics Cloud, and so on. Those are cloud applications that we can consume as a customer, and those are SaaS solutions, software as a service solution. They're hosted somewhere else, and we can consume it. Then we have, what SAP calls side-by-side extensions, where we can extend our on-prem, our cloud applications with custom stuff. We have different ways where we can, integrate. We can build our own applications. We can enrich our applications with partner applications. And there's a lot of things we can integrate even with third-party, non-SAP, and so on. And then ultimately, all that needs to be run somewhere. Where do we run it nowadays? We run it either on-prem or in the cloud. So there's a lot of different cloud providers. We have the hyperscalers like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Alibaba, or even SAP themselves to host those applications for us. We don't have to have a basement where we run the servers. They run somewhere in the cloud, and we are just consuming. We're either consuming entire applications, or we're consuming solutions, and so on. And everything needs to be interconnected. But we still have our on-prem as well. We still have S/4HANA or ECC, where they're not going away anytime soon. And all those applications now also want to be integrated with the cloud application. So when we talk about, for example, Ariba or SuccessFactors or Fieldglass, they also have to be integrated with, for example, S/4HANA on-prem. We have extensions, we have processes that might start in the cloud, go over to on-prem, and then go into another cloud application for like a end-to-end business process. So there's a lot of interconnectivity, and there's a lot of access authorizations required, for our end users to perform their jobs or their tasks in one application or in many applications. Whether those applications are hosted internally, like an on-prem, or in the cloud, or with a third party, at the end of the day, we still have to have it under control. So there's a huge move into cloud, into those hybrid landscapes. Every customer nowadays, sooner or later, talks about not just the S4 migration, but also about the transition and to move into the cloud, and adopting more and more cloud applications. Whether we start with like an Office 365 that has nothing to do with SAP, we start there, but then ultimately more and more stuff will move into the cloud. With the cloud, what typical challenges do we see? Obviously, we see a lot of challenges, a lot more than what I'm just showing here. But these are the ones that are most commonly with us from a SAP security perspective that we have to deal with. And I break these down into three. I break them down into provisioning, authorization, and authentication. So what does that mean? That means that ultimately we have a user ID lifecycle, which I have another slide here in a minute. We have a user ID lifecycle where we have to do provisioning. So we have to have users, our end users, they have to have an account in all those applications where they need access. So if you have a sales manager that needs to access a cloud app, that's, but also CRM and S/4HANA, maybe Concur for travel and expense, that sales manager needs a user account provisioned in all of those applications. That sales manager also needs authorizations in all those applications. And when we talk about authorizations, historically we talked a lot about ABAP authorizations in ECC and on the ABAP world, but there's also cloud applications that require authorizations. Luckily for us, in most cases, in the cloud applications, the authorization concepts are simpler than ABAP. ABAP is the most complex authorization concept there is. In certain applications, like for example, field glass, a user can only have one role. So there's not the issue like we have in S/4HANA or in ECC where a user has a couple of hundred roles, and then every time they have an issue, they need one more. In field glass, they have one role. But also the entire authorization concept is much simpler, obviously. And that's obviously also true for a lot of the other cloud applications. But regardless, users, they have to be provisioned, and they also have to have the correct authorizations. When it comes to authorizations or provisioning in general, nowadays we have to talk about compliant provisioning. So everything needs to follow compliant processes. We have to have risk under control, so access governance, a big topic, running, proactively running, GRC risk scans for critical authorizations, critical activities, and so on. And that also needs to happen against the cloud applications. And then last but not least, obviously also the authentication, how a user can authenticate towards the system. So if I have a sales manager again, they go into the SAP GUI, log on to S/4HANA, they might use username and password, or they use single sign-on in best case, and they just are authenticated to S4. Now, obviously the same thing you also want to have for the cloud. So if they have to access Concur, ideally we want them to get into Concur with single sign-on, the same way they get into S4HANA. If they get into another cloud application, we also want them to be authenticated automatically with single sign-on into those cloud applications. You might want to enable multi-factor for additional security. All that we also require for the cloud applications, because at the end of the day, everything is interconnected. So we have to follow the same principles that when it comes to security, also for those applications in the hybrid landscape, not just S4. Everything around that touches S4 and all the applications we have in scope, we want to have protected. So what does that mean? Or especially from an identity lifecycle perspective, when we talk identity provisioning, it's not just that we have to provision a user to create a new user and assign authorizations to a user. When it comes to the user accounts, it's an entire life cycle. Obviously, when a relationship begins, when a user starts, like for example, for a new hire, we have to make sure when the person starts, the user has the correct authorizations and the user accounts available in all the systems they need. So that means we have to provision the user to S4, to Concur, Fieldglass, wherever, and depending on what the job is, wherever those users need authorizations and access, that needs to be provisioned. At the same time, we also have to make sure that when the relationship changes, so for example, a person changes a job or a person moves from one location into another, then the authorizations and all that needs to change as well. In most cases, it needs to change. So we have to do user access reviews, and we have to review and check whether new access is required, whether the old is still accurate. All that needs to happen as well, all the way down to when the relationship ends. So eventually, employees terminate, whether they quit or they get fired or laid off, however you want to call it. At one point in time, a relationship will end, and that also means that all the access, all the user accounts, they need to be deprovisioned, not just in S/4HANA, also in Ariba, also in Concur, also in Fieldglass. In all the applications they had access, the deprovision needs to happen as well, because otherwise we have user accounts that are still valid that someone could potentially log into, not even employees of the company anymore. That can be a huge risk as well. So ID life cycle, obviously very, very important. And along the way, there's a lot of changes, a lot of impact that always happen. That makes it very, very complex and very difficult to manage. So let's look into that. What does SAP offer? SAP offers different type of services for the life cycle, for the access governance, as well as for the authentication. Commonly, we refer to those applications that SAP offers as IES, IPS, and IHE. So it's the identity authentication. If I start from the right, the identity authentication service is basically the authentication mechanism that allows us to configure how a user can authenticate to those applications, whether the application is S4 or a cloud app. Single sign-on, multi-factor, all that can be established also for browser-based application and so on. On the other hand, we have IPS on the far left here, the identity provisioning, that takes care of the identity lifecycle management. So basically, creating users, assigning roles, unassigning roles, or groups, or however the technical privileges are called. It's basically all that, the provisioning portion. And then in the middle, we have IHE, the identity access governance, where we have the compliant processes, where we have user and role administration with risk analysis, with the workflows, access request management, role design management, and so on, to provision and do it in a more automated and more workflow-driven approach to get those users created with the proper way through IES, IPS, and so on. If you look at those cloud applications, they correspond a little bit with the on-premise world. So when we talk about IHE, for example, here in the middle, IHE is very similar to access control, SAP access control or SAP GRC. Oftentimes it's just referred to SAP GRC when we talk about access control. So IHE does not necessarily replace access control, but it offers very similar functionality in different ways, obviously a little different and in a limited fashion. But from a thought perspective, it's the same thought that IHE has like access control. On the same side, like IPS, a little bit like identity management, where we do the provisioning. Obviously not so much the workflows, that's more than in IHE, but that's more the provisioning. And when it comes to IES, that's like single sign-on, where we really try to enable, the, passwordless authentication, where, with the Windows account, Azure account, for example, we can authenticate to the applications. So there's applications available, there's different tools available, and today we want to look into what's available and what do those tools do. And what I really want to focus on is the IHE, the identity access governance, because with identity access governance we can really cover the entire access governance process, where we can, in a automated and workflow-driven way, do the provisioning through IPS. We have IES for the authentication portion. So when a customer implements IHE, in the background there's a bundled IES and IPS. So ultimately, IHE doesn't come alone. It always comes with IES and IPS. IHE alone doesn't really do much. It's a combination of IHE with IES and IPS in the background. What does IHE offer? IHE offers 5 different services that are, for those of you that know access control, are somewhat similar to what access control offers in the modules. In IHE, they're called services. We have a service for access analysis. We have a service for role design. We have a service for access request. We have one for access certification, and also one for privileged access management. What does that mean? Privileged access management is the firefighter, like the emergency access management in access control. Access analysis is ARA, access risk analysis in access control. Role design is in a very simple form, the BRM, business role management. Access request is somewhat similar to the access request management in access control. And then the access certification corresponds more to the user access review that we have in access control as part of an ARM workflow process. So it's 5 different services that do different things and have different abilities, and I want to look into those, what they are here. So let me start with the access analysis. So access analysis, at the end of the day, what can we do there? Yeah, pretty simple. We have a rule set, and in that rule set we can define functions and risks. and to analyze, either against roles or users, whether there's a critical authorization risk or whether there's a critical or a segregation of duty risk. So very similar to access control. What's the big difference here? Obviously, IHE is a cloud application, and IHE can talk to cloud as well as on-premise. So with IHE, we can analyze risks for users and roles in cloud as well as on-prem. That means we can analyze, for example, success factors, field glass, analytics cloud, but also on-prem ABAP, like for example S/4HANA or ERP, that can be analyzed directly out of IHE. IHE comes with predefined rule sets, so there's rule sets available, similar to access control, just for the on-prem. They're also available for cloud applications. We can also do mitigating controls, so we can mitigate risks and assign mitigating controls to it to keep track of what has been reviewed and mitigated. Very similar there. It also comes with access refinement and remediation options. So when we have risks and we have risks, let's say on a user level, it doesn't just tell us what can be or what is causing the risk. It also gives us the ability to do some access refinement in a sense of what could be unassigned from that user to reduce the number of risks. And we can do that based on what has been used. So we can use users usage data from the backends where available. Or it just breaks out where risks come from which role, and which roles can be removed to have risk-free access. Stuff like that can be done in IHE. So it's very similar to the ARA module in access control. Ultimately, a rule set that allows us to analyze risks. With IHE, similar to access control as well, we can do cross-system risk analysis as well. Cross-system means we have a risk between two systems. So for example, an SOD conflict, we have one function in system 1 and the other function in system B. That could be, for example, a risk between Ariba and S/4HANA. So we have one portion of one side of the coin, if you will, in Ariba and the other in S/4HANA, and it will basically evaluate that together to see whether we have a cross-system SOD conflict. And that could be, for example, we have a PO process where someone can submit a PO in one system and approve in the other. Stuff like that. That could be in two different systems, and that's why it could be an SOD conflict across system boundaries. That's why cross-system risk analysis is obviously very important to be supported here as well. Then we also have the role design. I said it's like a lightweight solution of the BRM from access control. So what can we do with role design? Primarily, the goal here is to build business roles, because we have the next module or the next service we'll look into is the access request. And with the access request service, we can provision users, creating users or assigning authorizations to users. And when it comes to role assignments, or even the entire topic of role mining, which role has to be assigned to users, we very often do that with business roles, especially when it's cross-system. And that's when business roles come into picture, where we can say, hey, I have a business role that's called sales manager. Sales manager consists of certain access in S/4HANA. It consists of certain access in Concur. It consists of certain access in CRM, and maybe another application as well. So when a sales manager starts, all we have to request is one role, the sales manager business role. Once approved, it will provision into all the applications, one application being S4, the other being cloud applications. So the goal with the role design service ultimately is to enable those business roles. We can create those business roles. We can maintain certain attributes to those business roles. For example, who are the approvers, what business and sub-business process they belong to, criticality. A few things can be maintained on that business role. It's very limited to what can be maintained, but what can be maintained is ultimately what most customers really need, and that's really the big advantage there. We can obviously, with the role design service, also maintain attributes to technical roles. So if you want to provision, single roles or composite roles or groups directly, that's possible as well. Ideally, and the desired approach very often is the business roles, but it could also be the technical role that we import from a backend system, and where we just maintain attributes that obviously can be provisioned directly as well. For the business role creation, there's a couple of things how we can do that. We can do the manual way, where we define it just the way we want to do it. And then there's also a couple of tools that SAP has in IHE that are a little gimmicky. I always call them gimmicky. With machine learning and different tools where we can try to calculate business roles based on user assignments, what they have in the backend, to come up with like a role mining way of getting the business roles built. I haven't really seen it working just yet, but there's initiatives going in that direction too, to bring machine learning into the context, to find better or other ways to create business roles as well. In most cases, the old approach, we're just doing it manually. It's cross system. It needs a concept, and those concepts, someone has to think about them, and then we implement them. But the role design service really is there to enable the roles for the access request. When we talk about the access request, let's talk about it really. So access request, what can we do in access request? This is a workflow-based service where we basically have the ability in like a self-service scenario, either to request for myself or for someone else, access. We can define what can be requested through authorization policies. So we can say, similar to authorizations in access control, we can say whether users can request just for themselves or for other people as well. We can define whether they can request business roles or whether they can request for one system but not for the other. Certain things like that can be limited to. At the end of the day, what do we have? We have access request workflows where, like I said, we can either someone for themselves or for someone else, we can request access, and then it goes through an approval workflow where we have, for example, the manager and the role owner, and once approved, the tool will provision the applications. So in a best case scenario, we have like a business role, a user requests a business role, the manager approves, role owner approves, maybe there's risk mitigations along the way. Let's say there's no risks, everything is fine, we go for provisioning, role has been approved, and then IHE will provision into the backends. Whether that backend is a on-prem or a cloud application, doesn't matter, it will just do the provisioning through the IPS. What can we as well do here? The access request also offers what we call HR trigger. Historically, we can capture and receive HR events from success factors, and then we can process them in an automated fashion. So what I was mentioning before with the identity life cycle, we can also do that coming from success factors. So we can receive HR events and then respond to those in an automated way. So let's say we have a new hire, and for new hire, we want to create a user account. Or we have a termination, and we want to delete those user accounts. That event can be captured from success factors and automatically be processed to do the provisioning or the deprovisioning of access or user accounts in general. That is possible as well. Okay. I just saw there's a question. Let me just very quickly read the question, and we can just answer it right here. Yeah, so what's the question regarding the access risk analysis from before, whether the rule sets can be customized? Yes, absolutely. So we can load standard rules from SAP. We can change those, or we can build our own rules, same way as we've done that in access control. That is possible. We can download them, work it with them in Excel, and re-upload. And we can also migrate rule sets from access control into IHE. So everything is possible when it comes to the rule set. Same flexibility as we had in access control. And I hope that answers that question. That risk analysis portion is obviously also integrated in the access request. So when we request access, the risk analysis runs as well. So we can see whether an assignment would create a risk or not. So that portion is also integrated into the access request workflow for compliant provisioning, obviously. So that's ultimately about the access request. Then we also have access certification or access recertification, which is typically just user access review. What can we do here? This is a workflow-driven approach to review periodically or ad hoc to review access that is assigned to end users. So typically most organizations do that once per year, where they do a user access review, where we want to review all the access in a productive environment, for example, to see if they're still accurate and current, and if not, we remove it, and they do that as part of a user access review. So those are, access-driven or data-driven workflows, more for the recertification or the review of assignments. That's ultimately what we can do here as well. This is not necessarily an access request. It's different. It's a different workflow, and it's really meant to review what's already been assigned and approved to just see whether it's still current or not. If something gets removed or unassigned from a user access review and users still need that, it would have to be requested back with a regular access request. So this is a separate, siloed process to do the user access review. And then I see there was just one other question. Let me just very quickly read that. There was a question regarding HR events, a very technical question about the lots or about the size of the matrix. Regarding a limit, I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly. I'll get back to you regarding the question. I'll get back to that. I'm not 100% sure, so let me get back to that. Okay, so access certification, really more user access review type of things. And then last but not least, we also have the privileged access management or PAM. It's ultimately firefighter. Firefighter has been around with since Versa. It had different names over the years. I think firefighter is the one that sticks the most. Lately the last name we had was the emergency access management, as it was called. A lot of companies call it firefighter. What does IHG offer here? At the moment, it only offers firefighting for on-prem, so only for the ABAP environment. And it's very similar to access control. It's an ID-based firefighter, meaning we have a user account, like a service user account that can be used to log on to, that has the firefighting or the emergency authorization or the privilege authorization. So the user, if I would use a firefighter, I would log in through the logon tab to a service user ID and then execute the emergency activities with that service user. So it's the same approach as the ID-based firefighter in access control. Currently only available for ABAP. On the roadmap, it says that it will be available, I think, in Q2 this year, also for S/4HANA public cloud, so for the cloud version, public cloud, to have a firefighter scenario. Other cloud applications at the moment are not supported. We would have to check the roadmap, what's planned next. There's a lot of hurdles for cloud because of authentication reasons and different reasons why that we cannot do that the same way as we do it on the ABAP side. But currently, ABAP is what is supported. Perfect. When it comes to IHG, high-level perspective, what are the approaches that we typically see? There's mainly two approaches how IHG can be used, and I call them the cloud-driven approach or cloud-only approach, where we ultimately have the IHG as a cloud application, and then together with the identity services, the IS IPS in the background, it does the entire provisioning for on-prem as well as for the cloud application, as we can see here. We have here the IDM mentioned. We can kind of disregard that for this conversation with IDM.
So IHE at the end of the day supports SAP applications, SAP Cloud and SAP On-Prem applications, as well as we have the ability to work with a SCIM interface to also do the user provisioning and so on for applications that support SCIM. If there's like a third-party application, at the moment it's not supported up here. So if we have like specific third parties, we could do that through an IDM, for example. But I don't want to focus too much on that. For the SAP world, and when it comes to IHE only, that means you only have IHE, we don't have access control, and we run all those workflows, all the risk analysis, the compliance stuff, the user review, firefighting through IHE directly into the backend system, whether they are cloud or they're on-prem, it doesn't matter. Everything works directly in IHE. That also means that our end users, for the self-service, when they request access, for example, for themselves, they would log into IHE and request the access there. Okay, this is what I call the cloud-driven or cloud-only approach. There are obviously certain limitations with IHE. So IHE is not SAP Access Control just yet. In SAP Access Control, we're very flexible. We have different means to interact and customize the system, meaning we have, for example, BRF Plus and MSMP, but we also have ABAP code. We can use bodies and user exits to enhance, to write our own logic for something that SAP by default does not support. All those customizations are not possible in IHE because IHE is a SaaS solution, software as a service, so we're only consuming a service. That means we have no ability to go into the code and make an enhancement. That's not possible, at least not as of today. Because every customer shares the same application, so it's the same code base. I cannot just go make a change. That would interfere with other customers. That's why that is not possible as of today. When it comes to the MSMP or the BRF Plus, what IHE uses is like a rule service where we can build different business rules. Like we can, for example, work on the initiator rule to define where the workflow goes, which path it takes. We can define workflow approvers. Those certain things we can do, but it's very limited. It's not as flexible as we were in access control. In access control, we can say if there's a request, we can say certain roles need to be approved by manager and role owners, others only by role owner. Something like that is not possible as of today in IHE because it's not as flexible. But obviously for a lot of customers that have simple, straightforward processes, a very valuable approach to just really go into the cloud and make use of that and have a simple, straightforward implementation to get it, to get those processes going. The second approach is what we call hybrid approach, or SAP also calls it the IHE bridge approach, where we ultimately have access control as well as IHE. So we have both. We have the on-prem access control, and then we connect IHE to that access control. And that's when we call it IHE bridge. What does IHE bridge mean? IHE bridge means that the on-prem is handled by SAP access control directly. So if we do, let's say we do a user provisioning, or we're requesting access to an access request, that access request runs in access control. So the end users, they will access control. They will request in access control. They will do the risk analysis in access control. We will build the roles, the business roles, everything in access control. In access control, we obviously also have BRF Plus, MSMP, we have the ABAP code. We are very, very, very flexible. Everything you can think of, I can implement for you guys in access control because there's no limitations. We can do everything you can think of. It is possible because we have the means to do that. There's user exit and different ways we can interact with the system. What the IHE bridge enables us to do is IHE bridge in this scenario, the IHE application serves as like a middleware or a proxy to do the provisioning and the risk analysis for the cloud applications. So that means in access control, I can build a business role for my sales manager that contains a role or a set of roles from S/4HANA, but also roles from Concur, Fieldglass, maybe C/4HANA. And then in access control, that role can be requested, gets approved, and then once final approved, it will go into provisioning. And then access control will provision the portion of that business role that's on-prem, which means S4, and forward the provisioning for the cloud applications into IHE, and then IHE with the IPS will provision the backend systems in the cloud, like Concur, Fieldglass, C/4HANA. And then obviously also reply back to access control the status of that provisioning, whether it happened, whether it's still pending, whether it was failed. That information will go back into access control. End users are entirely on access control. Admins are 90% on access control, might have 10% to monitor maybe in the IHE, but ultimately everything is running in access control, and it's just using the IHE as a middleware to get into the cloud. Risk analysis for cloud will obviously come from IHE. So when we have an access request, and we do an access request, and we request a business role, and there's a risk analysis to be run, then the cloud portion will be analyzed by IHE. And it will come back into access control, where we can see, oh, yep, if you assign this hiring manager role in Fieldglass, that will create a risk. And we will see that here in access control. Why do customers go with this IHE bridge approach? Mainly because we have access control already. We have invested a lot into access control. We made it very custom to us, where we have custom workflows. Where a workflow, depending what it is, it makes a right turn or left turn or goes straight, or we have auto approvals in certain scenarios. We are very flexible in how we define our workflows. And if that's a requirement, then we have to, at the moment at least, we have to remain on access control. But we still have also the requirement to connect the cloud, because we want to do compliant provisioning and all that stuff also for the cloud applications. Then we connect IHE to access control. And that's when we have that IHE bridge scenario. One thing that I kind of forgot to mention earlier is obviously with the different cloud applications, and especially the user provisioning and the different identities we have across those applications. And that's a big challenge. When we think about the ABAP world, we know in ABAP, we go to SU01, we create a user, we look at the user, it's up to 12 characters. So my username in S4 on-prem is Banzer. That's my username. First of my first name and then my last name. So Banzer. When I go to SuccessFactors, my username might be my personal number. When I go to Analytics Cloud, my username might be abanzer@exciting.com, my email address. So we have different user IDs across different applications. And that's a problem for provisioning as well as for risk analysis, especially when we do cross-system risk analysis. Because if I do a cross-system analysis, I want to know which person can do something in Ariba and another thing in S4, that's a conflict. And for that to analyze, we have to know that one person, Alessandro, is a Banzer in S4 and a Banzer@exciting.com in Ariba. And that's what when we talk about identity consolidation or user ID mappings, that obviously needs to happen as well. That's a big undertaking, especially if not, so if you don't think about that up front, then it's a big challenge, because those cloud applications, they're not all supporting the same user IDs. There are ways to find or group and map them together. There's now global user IDs and stuff that we can use through IES, but that's also one thing that needs to be considered. That's why we have to use these identity services. We need to use IES and IPS, so we can also provision those global identities, those global, it's called global UUID, unique user IDs, that we know, okay, the user in S4, whatever the username, corresponds to a user in Ariba, because it's the same global user, global UUID. It's the same person. It's both time Alessandro, and that's important to consider here as well, especially for provisioning as well. If you request a business role and it provisions into 3 applications, you need to provision the right user. Okay, so that's obviously one very, very important step along the way as well. When we go into the cloud, the user IDs are not always the same. And that's maybe because we don't want it, or we didn't think about it, or the application doesn't support it. There's different reasons why they're not always the same. That's definitely one thing to think about as well, to keep in mind. For everything I've mentioned, there is solutions. There is, there are tools that can help us to have those issues under control. Like I said, for the user consolidation, we have the IES where we can do a lot of things. There's other tools that help us to consolidate identities if that needs to be done. And then obviously for access governance, for the provisioning, for all that, there's solutions available as well that we can use to take care of all that. How can if you are going and you're facing these challenges in the cloud and in hybrid landscapes, and or you're adopting those applications, it's definitely important to think about them and get the expertise and help you understand what you really need to consider when you're implementing all these applications and security for them and all the compliance and access governance stuff that goes along with it. So ultimately, the cloud is on the rise. It will not be able to be stopped. This is a machinery that's running. More and more will go into the cloud. SAP is pushing that away, but also other software providers. Everything is going in the cloud because there's a lot of advantages with cloud applications. Some disadvantages, but obviously a lot of advantages as well. When it comes to the identity access management, identity lifecycle, the provisioning, authentication, all that, that's still core. That's important to have those applications under control. With the cloud, obviously, because we're just consuming a service, we don't have the same, I would say, the same tasks or the same responsibilities anymore as we have with an S4 on-prem, because a lot of the responsibilities are with the cloud provider, which might be, for example, SAP. They have to have their platform under control. They have to back up the data. We don't have to care about that. That's what we buy from the cloud provider. They also have to make sure that the network is under control, that the database is secure. All that is provided by the host or the provider. What we have to care is about the applications, how users get into the applications, what authorizations they have in the applications, and then obviously the ID lifecycle. That's what we have to care about for those cloud applications. There's very little that we can do from a true security perspective. I mean, obviously with IES, the multi-factor, all that stuff, obviously yes. But from a customization perspective, where we can lock applications down, not so much like we did on the on-prem. So it's really shifting, and we have the providers that have to take care of that. How can we help? As exciting, obviously we offer different consulting services. We have a cloud team. We have a cloud security team that's been very knowledgeable. That is very knowledgeable about the cloud, IHE, for example, IES, IPS, but then also just the cloud applications in general when it comes to the security portion of it. And we can obviously help you with that as well. So if there's any need for implementation, for training, for support, for anything you need, we have the consulting services available that can help you, get a project underway or even outsource entire projects to us. We do a lot of IHE projects, we do a lot of IS, IPS projects at the moment because that's where the majority of our customers are moving towards. With that, let me check the questions box. I thought there were a couple of questions coming in, and I hope we can answer them here live. There was one question regarding the IHE bridge scenario. It says if IHE only has to be used as middleware, why not use IS, IPS services from GRC itself? That's a very good question. So first of all, there is limitations with licenses for the IPS. So when you purchase a cloud application, you will also get IES IPS because you have to authenticate and provision to that cloud application. So when you get an IES is always full. It's always a full-blown IES. I mean, there's no limitations of what that IES can do. So from an IES perspective, no problem. From the IPS perspective, it is. It's a license issue at the end of the day, where you're not getting a full-blown IPS. You can only provision to those applications that you purchased, and it's one IPS at a time. So you wouldn't have the ability to fully provision everything with one IPS because there's license restrictions. When you purchase IHE, then you get the full-blown IPS and you can provision whatever you want to provision. So it's a little bit not necessarily a technical issue, it's more a license issue that you won't get the full-blown IPS to do the provisioning. That's kind of like the reason why that is. So it's more like limitations that SAP purposely put there so the customers move to the IHE. Then there was another one, and if it doesn't answer the question, just feel free to follow up on that. Then there was one regarding RA, if workflow was allowed. Yeah, so the question is regarding whether IHE can ultimately replace access control. Yes and no. Yes, if you're okay with what IHE offers, with those limitations that I was mentioning, you know, we have only certain customization abilities. If that is okay and you can cover your processes and you're okay with them, then absolutely you can replace access control with IHE. I have done customer projects, multiple, where we have done that, where they had, you know, straightforward access control, and there was no complexity, nothing, custom about it. As absolutely. As soon as it's very custom and a lot of like customization, that's a big question mark. We will have to see what the next IHE releases bring. At the moment, the business rules that we can use, the business rule services, offer certain things, but it doesn't allow us a lot. It just gives us like the ability to do that, initiate the rule, and for the HR trigger, we can do some logic, but we're still very limited. So one example, for example, is if let's say you have an access request and you want to do a detouring rule. You want to detour to a risk manager. Not possible at the moment. If you want to like split the workflow, not possible. If you want to have different approvers for different, let's say we want to split like risk owners, for example. You want to have a risk owner for the US and a risk owner for Germany. The users from Germany, you want risk owner from Germany. If it's from the US, you want the risk owner from the US. Not possible. You can do the access control. So as soon as it's like outside the standard, then not. Now that's for the moment. SAP is obviously investing heavily into IHE. I will be in Las Vegas next week for the SAP Insider GRC conference. We'll see what SAP has to present about IHE. There's new things that will be presented. We'll see where it goes. I'm very hands-on with IHE. I haven't seen much yet in that direction, but obviously we can continuously see it's getting better. There's more functionality coming, and it's getting more attention as well. More customers are adopting IHE, and a lot of more customers have a lot of more needs. So it will get more flexible, and I'm pretty confident at one point in time, my answer would be yes, you can replace it regardless. At the moment, we're not right there. Okay. Hope that makes sense. And then let me see about the HR trigger. Yeah, regarding HR triggers. So currently there's no access request generated. And it's configured. So that's more like a technical issue, I assume. I mean, with the HR trigger, what we can do is we can capture the event, and then based on a business rule with logic, like a decision table, we can trigger an access request, whether that's, you know, if we're capturing like a new hire, we can say for new hire, if it's position 1, assign business role 1. If it's position 2, assign business role 2, for example. For termination, we can delete the user. And that's like a matrix that needs to be built in the business rules. I'm not sure if you're referring to that. Certain things are possible. I'm not sure if there's limitation. I mean, the decision table has a limit. Maybe that's what you're referring to with the 9,099 lines. But that's a lot of rules if that is the case. I would say for that question, we can always talk offline and see. Just feel free to shoot me an email, and then we can always jump on a quick call and look into that as well, because you know, whenever there's limitations and something very specific and tricky, that's what I love. So I love to you know, get my head wrapped around stuff like that and figure it out. With that, Shelly, I think we're good in time. Yeah, not bad. Got 2 minutes to spare. I think I covered all the questions.
Yeah.
And with that, I would say thank you very much, everyone. And I'm looking forward to Las Vegas next week. If any one of you is there, feel free to stop by. We have a booth, exciting booth. We have a couple of sessions. One about RFC security, like an Impact 20 session, and then we have one about central security monitoring with SIEM integration, which will be very interesting. Or just stop by our booth if you have any questions about IHE, IS, IPS, authorization in general, or anything else that's, you know, that bothers you. Just come and stop by and you know, grab one of our giveaways and yeah, just talk to us.
Stop by and say hi.
Yep. Perfect.
All right. Thanks, Alessandro. Remember,
Thank
there's
you.
one more session next Thursday. The link for the registration is in the handout section of this go-to screen. And again, you'll receive an email with the link to the recording like I said, about 24 hours after this session is ended. If you don't receive an email or have any additional questions regarding today's session, reach out to marketing@exciting.com or to myself at sjames@exciting.com. Let us know and we'll send out the link again. Have a great rest of your day and hope to see you guys again next week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.